attack, saying Labour wants to depress its way to victory. The Prime Minister accuses Keir Starmer of gaslighting and scaremongering and says he's confident he can win the next general election. I'll be picking up on those points with Labour's Shadow Business and Trade Secretary Jonathan Reynolds, who will join us live. But a potential headache emerges during the Sunak speech. A judge rules that large parts of the government's Illegal Migration Act shouldn't apply in Northern Ireland because of human rights breaches. Also tonight, we'll be hearing from the Health Secretary Victoria Atkins as a new report concludes that poor care in maternity services is frequently tolerated. We'll be live in New York as Donald Trump's longtime lawyer and personal fixer tells the hush money trial that the former president feared more women coming forward. And as the Minister for Common Sense announces a common sense fight back, we'll be asking what common sense laws you would bring in. All that and more with Dawn Butler and Nick Ferrari, who will be with us for the next hour. It's Monday, I'm Sophy Ridge live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Well, first off then tonight, we can get a bit more on Rishi Sunak's big speech earlier, where he accused Labour of trying to depress their way to victory. The Prime Minister put national security at the heart of the general election campaign today in a wide-ranging speech which felt an awful lot like a soft campaign launch. He said Labour couldn't be trusted to keep the country safe and presented the Conservatives as better the devil you know. Well, Sky's Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates has tonight's first report.
Hi, Dean. Hi, Prime Minister.
Rishi Sunak today pitching his big argument for the next election. The country cannot risk change, militarily, economically, or politically.
I'm convinced that the next few years will be some of the most dangerous, yet the most transformational that our country has ever known. Who has the clear plan and bold ideas to deliver a secure future for you and your family?
The Prime Minister painted a grim picture of a world filled with threats of every kind.
Russia, Iran, China, Hamas, gender activists, Scottish nationalists.
Labour, he said, was more focused on the chaos of the Liz Truss era than what's to come. It wasn't all doom and gloom.
Our country stands at a crossroads. Over the next few years, almost every aspect of our lives is going to change.
His reasons for optimism span from AI tech to football kits and from new cancer treatments to the Rwanda policy. A very wide-ranging speech with one big campaign message.
You can trust me to keep you and your family safe and secure from the threats we face at home and abroad. Because with bold action and a clear plan, we can and we will create a secure future.
The 30-minute speech contained no new policy, but the Prime Minister has already pledged to raise defence spending to 2.5% of national income by 2030, and his party desperately needs the political credit to escape tanking at the polls. Rishi Sunak presented the prospect of a Keir Starmer victory as a boost for Vladimir Putin. This is going to be the tone of the general election campaign for weeks and months to come. Now, the Tories have used fear to beat Labour opponents in the past, but will it work this time for a Prime Minister who sometimes seems to struggle to catch a break? Part of his flagship Rwanda policy today blocked by a court in Northern Ireland. The DUP now fear migrants will head there in future, safe from deportation.
Didn't know a mayoral election could be quite as exciting as it was.
In Wolverhampton, Keir Starmer gathering his new team of election-winning mayors. Labour would scrap the Rwanda policy. Its leader says security is his first priority.
Prime Minister today has made a speech. I think it's his 7th reset in 18 months. And we can't afford another 5 years of this government's chaos and division because there's a cost to that.
Both of these men want to be the one that you trust with the nation's security. But study them closely. If they look and sound the same on this, will anyone be convinced that they're that different? Sam Coates, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, Sam is here with us now. Sam, it felt like the kind of campaign speech that we're going to hear again and again and again. But at the same time, how, I guess, worried do you think Rishi Sunak could feel about a ruling over Northern Ireland?
That's right. I mean, it was a curious speech by the Prime Minister. I think there were quite
keen on bigging it up this morning, but it pinged all over the place, the sheer number of different topics that he covered. I do think it was a weird location and a weird, it was one of those occasions where actually the production values were quite poor. His voice came across tinny. He came across as quite a small figure. I mean, I think that's probably just a function of how it was filmed, but he didn't look like a big prime ministerial presence at that moment. But the argument at the heart of it was a very familiar one for anyone who's followed an incumbent government election campaign, which is to say, better the devil you know, you can trust us. So that was the message at the core of it, unoriginal, even if the style and the production values and some of the content was quite unusual. But then the Prime Minister, who struggles to catch a break, had this court judgment about Rwanda from a court in Northern Ireland. Now, over time, the implications are going to come clearer. But there are two immediate consequences. First of all, the DUP say, well, it could well be the case now that migrants that come to the UK, any part of the UK, just go to Northern Ireland in order to basically escape being deported to Rwanda. So that is potentially a problem. We're going to have to see how that plays out. But the other thing is, it just reminded everybody that in many ways Brexit isn't completely solved, that there are differences in Northern Ireland about how the way the law is applied there to the whole of the rest of Great Britain, and some vestiges of our membership of the European Union remain in place there, but not anywhere else. And that's a complication for a Prime Minister that just wants to make the argument that he's solved all these issues.
Interesting. And I guess just widening it out as well and talking back about the campaign speech, do you feel that this is something, I guess, this is the kind of battle lines that he's trying to draw for the election?
Yeah, undoubtedly these are the battle lines: economic security, military security, better the devil you know. The challenge for Rishi Sunak is not what he's done, but what he's inherited. And that's very much how Labour will present their side of the argument. They make the case, how can you preach security when you've had so many prime ministers, so much turbulence? But don't expect this to be the last time you hear that set of arguments hurled at one another. Yeah,
I've got a feeling that we're going to have a fair few months of this to go. Sam, thank you very much indeed. Sam Coates there, Deputy Political Editor. Well, Sam was just talking about how Labour's going to react to it, and joining us now, as if by magic, is the Shadow Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds. Great to have you on the programme. Well, what did you make of the PM speech?
Well, another Rishi Sunak reset. I mean, I've lost track of how many we've had. I think my personal favourite was the one where he said he was the change candidate, then he brought back David Cameron a few weeks later. The theme of today, face the future. I mean, I can't think of any British politician more afraid of the future than Rishi Sunak, who's refusing to call the election we all know is coming and that we all want, and is squatting in Downing Street till it happens. So not impressed as ever. And as Sam Coates has said, if we want to talk about national security and defence, well, just look at the Conservative record over the last 14 years. Look at the reduction in spending, look at the reduction in the size of the army. If he wants to fight an election on that, great. But it'll be on the Conservative record in office. And people, I think, want to change from that.
Let's talk about defence, shall we? Because, look, you make these points about the record in office, but I guess what the Prime Minister is saying is that they have a committed plan to defence funding. So they want to commit to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence by 2030. You say you'll do it when conditions allow. And I guess the argument is doing it when conditions allow. I mean, that's quite meaningless. What if conditions never allow? What does it mean?
It's a reflection of where we are. Now, for us, this is a priority. We want to see that happen. I cannot credibly come on here and say the Conservative plan, which is sacking some civil servants, it is a means to do that. I mean, if I was coming on with those lines, I think you would shred me pretty quickly, because it's just not a credible position. Now, it's very similar to when, quite rightly, people might ask, well, what about the NHS that needs money? What about education that needs money? What about criminal justice or transport? We have to have a stronger performing economy before we can put those commitments into any of those departments. That is the big focus for me and Rachel Reeves on the economic side of the Shadow Cabinet. We think our plan to do that, from industrial strategy to our green prosperity plan to a better relationship with the European Union, that is all part of that. But I can't give commitments when we can't pay for it. And that's got to be the crucial part.
So I guess you're saying, look, we've got to be straight with you. It's billions of pounds. Are you basically saying you might not be able to get to that in the first term of a Labour government? Is that the honest answer?
I think the strength of our plans, the difference they could make, and where this would rank as a priority is absolute at the top of our list. It's look at the record of Labour governments on national security. It's better than the Conservative.
But so you're saying that right now, because of the economic conditions, you can't commit to 2.5% in the first term of a Labour government. That's the truth.
We've got to make that decision. We'll have at least one more significant, probably, budget before the general election. And, of course, sometimes circumstances can come into play when you're talking about the world economy. So you've got to be careful. You're going to make a commitment like that. Can you really deliver upon it? but we are absolutely committed to it. And look, if the government came around tomorrow and said, here's a genuine, credible plan to doing this, of course we would look at that. If that was something we could do on a cross-party basis, that would be great. But I can't come on and tell you what the government have put forward is a serious plan to hit that target.
There's another thing that struck me in the speech today. He was just effectively saying that Labour are trying to depress their way to victory. Now, I'm sure Rishi Sunak wouldn't put it like this, but is there an argument that you're effectively fighting an election just saying, look, you hate the Conservatives, so vote for us instead?
No, I don't think so. And I don't think we live in a country where dissatisfaction with one party just feeds through for the other. It was a little bit like that in the 90s, I think, where one side went down, the other side went up. It's not like that anymore. We've had to change the Labour Party. We wouldn't have been where we are if we hadn't had that courage, that humility to say we had to change after 20 years.
Yeah, but it's also, you spend an awful lot of time talking about how bad the Conservatives have been. I mean, you start off talking about defence, talking about how our army's hollowed out. That I guess feeds into this idea that all Labour needs to do to win is basically to say we're not as bad as these guys.
I don't think it is like that. I mean, look, there's
depressing.
a lot that's going wrong in the UK, and often that becomes the topic of conversation. I think our plans for ambition on climate change, on getting good jobs in the UK on the back of that
you watered
ambition.
down your climate change. It's not a great one.
It's still the most expansive
and
substantial programme of any prospective government. I think if you look at our ambitions on security in the workplace, our New Deal for working people, again, a huge commitment from the Labour Party. Look at our ambitions on building homes, the most basic and fundamental thing for any family, a decent place to live. That is real ambition.
So what's that ambition then?
That is to build 1.5 million new homes in the course of the first term of a Labour government. This is, and by the way, that's not easy. You can pledge that, but often in local areas there's a strong backlash against building homes. You've got to get the infrastructure, the support in there as well. These are not small commitments, and I think it all speaks to a programme of real hope and renewal for the country if the government does change.
There's something else I really want to talk to you about today, because I think it's an extraordinarily important story. We're going to be covering it later in the programme as well, and that is the report, the birth trauma report into maternity care in the UK. I'll be honest, I've got a bit of a bee in my sort of personal bonnet about this. How important do you think it is, and what would Labour do differently?
Okay, I really welcome it. As much as any male politician can say they've had some experience of it. I've had 4 children born in NHS hospitals, some brilliant care, but I think there are some issues that need to be addressed, and I think actually often there's some of the data that tells us about the disparities for ethnic minority communities in the UK and how that needs to be addressed. There's a lot of what I've seen in the headlines so far that actually is Labour policy in terms of more midwives, more doctors, digitisation of health records in order to get the right care and continuity of care. But it's a really, really important piece of work, and obviously it needs to be studied coming out today. I think Wes Streeting's already said he's going to take it very seriously. Is
there a cultural problem? Where women, particularly say, women from non-white backgrounds, but many women of all backgrounds are just not listened to.
I think it's difficult to say when the NHS is such a large organisation. When I was first elected as an MP, we had real problems at our local hospital, Tameside Hospital. We changed those with new management. It was something we were able to work with local people to do as members of Parliament in there.
Do you really think
the
it's
culture
difficult
didn't need to change
say?
as part
Because,
of that,
it's something that comes up again and again in these reports, women saying that they weren't listened to. It feels like that's not a controversial thing to say.
I think the worry is when you have a report like this that it's going to create a splash, and then is it going to be followed through with? Is it going to be dealt with? I think the kind of issues that I've seen being identified there, they will strike a chord with people. I imagine you've got people contacting the show maybe with a personal experience that chimes very much with that. So what I've seen so far is this is a really important contribution that everyone should take seriously and move forward. Of course, it's just come out today, so everyone's going to have to study the detail of that. But a lot of what I've seen is already Labour policy, and I know Wes has welcomed it very strongly as Shadow Health Secretary.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Johnny Mercer is hopefully going to be with us soon. But thank you very much, Jonathan Reynolds. Good to have you on the programme today. Thank you. Well, of course, the Prime Minister's speech and the feedback on that is sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. We're going to have our extended press preview and news review from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be Pippa Creer, who's the political editor at The Guardian, and also Harry Cole, the political editor at The Sun. Right, let's bring in our duo for the evening, shall we? The Labour MP, Dawn Butler, and the broadcaster and commentator, Nick Ferrari. Good to have you both on the programme. Dawn, to you first. What did you make of the PM's speech?
I think that the Prime Minister is the king of gaslighting. He's gaslighting, or trying to gaslight, the entire nation. Everything that he's talking about has diminished, been destroyed. under his watch, 14 years of Conservative government. You can't turn around and say, oh, well, we're going to do this, that and the other, when why haven't you done it over the last 14 years? I mean, what gets me is that I'm still waiting for the first time when he went into number 10, when he said, I'm going to run a government of integrity, professionalism and something else. I can't remember what the third one was. And that just hasn't been the case, you know, in every opportunity. So I don't think people are that stupid to believe what he's saying.
As fans of any football team, from Arsenal to Manchester City to Leicester City and Ipswich will tell you the best form of defence is attack, and that's what he's doing. Hang on, Dawn. He's absolutely right. We're speaking on the day when I fear the Russians have made extraordinary advances in Kharkiv. I don't need to tell you about what's happening in the Middle East and a possible offensive in Rafah, and I've not even mentioned the Red Sea. The world is a dangerous place. And I think you've got to accept, not necessarily now, but it wasn't that long ago that your now party leader, Sir Keir Starmer, was advocating that Jeremy Corbyn should be the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, a man who said he didn't know whether he wanted nuclear weapons and he wouldn't use them if he did have. This is one place where you are very, very weak. And as Sophie just explored with one of your front bench colleagues, oh yes, we'll find the money, but we don't know quite when, or we don't know how well. Whereas at least the Conservatives said we're sacking 70,000 people to pay for it. This is one area where you're weak.
Yeah, but that's ridiculous, though, isn't it?
Why is that ridiculous?
How can you say, right,
what have I said?
They're going to sack 70,000 people to pay for it? But how does that work? Where are they going to sack these 70,000?
Why do you attack them? How are you going to pay for it?
Where are they going to sack the 70,000?
How are you going to
pay for it? But
it?
we're not in government, right?
Well, that's so easy.
So the thing is, but it's so easy to say, right, we're going to do it.
Well, at least they've said we're going to do it.
And I think, well, I'm quite surprised, actually, because normally if the Conservatives say we're going to do something, how are you going to do it? Put the details down, then we can say, cool, right, OK, we'll do it that way as well. And the world is... But hang on, the world is very dangerous at the moment.
Yeah,
it is very dangerous.
It is.
So why is our government not doing what's needed now? The world's not more dangerous tomorrow. The world's more dangerous today. So what's the government doing now?
They've just said they're going to increase defence spending. What more do you want?
Excuse me, all the stuff around artificial intelligence, right? All of that stuff that the government has been been slowly moving forward, all of that contributes to the dangers that we face.
I thought he was the Prime Minister who held the AI summit quite recently. Is that not the same Prime Minister who did that?
The summit didn't actually agree to anything.
Well, let's see what you guys are going to do.
It was just a summit.
Come on, then. What will you guys do with AI?
We're going to ensure that there's legislation around artificial intelligence.
What does that what is that legislation?
And the development of artificial intelligence and the guardrails in what it can do and how it... And hang on. And the guardrails in what it can do and how it can be used. The government's not doing anything like that at all.
And how might that be funded? Oh, we'll know when we get in. Go on, say it.
Well,
you'll know when you get in.
The fact is, you will know when we go in.
Well,
but actually, you don't have to fund it. It is a commitment of the government to say, this is what we're going. We don't have to fund it. What we have to do is ensure that these large companies and organisations abide by the law. That's what legislation and law does.
It's about the only thing he's got left, Sophie.
Blimey, you two have had your Weetabix this morning.
We actually get on quite well, remarkably. I don't know what happened there.
Blimey. Looking forward to the rest of the programme now. Dawn and Nick, thank you very much.
Not at all.
Indeed. Right, let's speak now, shall we, to the Veterans Minister, Johnny Mercer, shall we? Labour is saying your plan's not credible. Sacking all those civil servants. They don't believe it's possible.
Hi, good evening, Sophie. And look, you would expect to hear that from the Labour Party. Of course you would. I mean, there's already been a down payment on this. You know, £500 million going to Ukraine. That is where the fight is at the moment. I think you got, a clear plan to go to 2.5% from this Prime Minister. He's serious about it. And you can see the threats that he's trying to face. You've got a very sort of opaque and sort of cloudy promise to provide 2.5%, as and when conditions allow from the Labour Party. It's the same old thing, and I've got to be honest. What Nick was saying then was the heart of the matter. You're trying to tell me that these people who are campaigning for Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister 4 years ago, said he'd be a good Prime Minister, and then really want people like me to take them seriously when it comes to defence 4 or 5 years later. So, these are serious times. They require serious people and serious interventions from people like the Prime Minister.
You say that Labour's policy is cloudy because they're not putting an exact date on it. But, you're talking about serious commitment, serious times. And I have to say, are you really saying that your commitment is serious as well? Are you really expecting us to believe you can increase defence spending by, £75 billion by the end of the decade by cutting civil servants? Just by doing that?
Well, obviously, it's not as binary as you make out, is it? So that's one programme of efficiencies the government's looking to do. And whenever you make commitments around spending, and you would have seen when the press release came out, you saw the kind of gradated nature of that and exactly where that money is going to come from. What you're not going to see is any of that from the Labour Party. So you've got a clear plan on the one side to actually get on and meet the threats that we face today across the globe, and then you've got a kind of wishy-washy promise that I'm afraid kind of marks my generation of service. You know, I actually fought in Afghanistan under a Labour government, and I know what it felt like, and I know that people did lose their lives because we didn't have the kit and equipment that we should have had, and you know, people didn't get their ducks in a row when it came to defence spending. So look, I'm afraid I'll always get involved in a conversation around defence spending and how we look after our people and veterans, because I think it's incredibly important to the nation and what it speaks to about us. But at the same time, we have to be credible and treat these people with respect. The idea that you can suddenly campaign for Jeremy Corbyn, who wants to abolish the army, leave NATO, get rid of nuclear deterrent, and then 4 years later say, oh no, it's okay, we're only joking, elect us because we're serious, is not a credible plan.
You know, you speak very passionately about your own experiences in the armed forces. You know, how do you feel when you look back at the Conservatives' record on defence spending, you know, over the last decade or so? Some people say, look at the army, and they say, look, it's been hollowed out. Veterans haven't been treated properly. What would you say about your record on this?
Look, I mean, I've got to be honest, right? And I always get in trouble for being honest, but what you're saying there, I don't accept the premise of that question whatsoever. When I came to Parliament, okay, defence spending, what was it? It was £38 billion a year. It's now north of £50 billion a year. And you can have lots of conversations about how you spend that money, but the idea that, for example, Rishi Sunak has taken money out of defence, the maths just don't add up. And, you know, if you're looking at military capability, which is what it's about, and meeting the threats that we're going to... No, well, I'm coming on to that. That does not define our military strength and our capability. I mean, you know, there's 1.3 million people in the North Korean army, and they've got an annual budget of £2 billion. You know, it's completely out of sync in terms of when you're thinking about military capability. And our ability now to kind of project force at reach is something that we've never seen in the history of this country. And of course, equipment costs more, takes the place of soldiers, sailors and airmen and marines who could do it before. That is the natural progression of things. So if you're really going to look at military capability and investment in the military, you need to look at our capabilities, what our brilliant young men and women are doing every day. And the truth is now that we're beyond, you know, even from when I was serving, in what we're doing today, and we can always do more. We would always want to do more, and people like me will always argue for defence spending. But what I will stand firm against is this idea that this Prime Minister has taken the money out of defence, because it's just not true.
And there's something else I do really want to ask you about, because you've told a public inquiry that you've been told by multiple officers about allegations that members of the SAS unlawfully killed Afghan citizens and then tried to cover it up. And you've been asked to hand over the names of the people who told you that, your sources. Are you going to do that?
Well, look, I mean, the premise of your question is incorrect, but I'm not going to say anything. I think it'd be disrespectful to the inquiry. I think it'd be unprofessional to say anything about that inquiry. It's a very serious issue, very serious matters, and that needs to be kept within that courtroom as is right and proper.
What have I said that's incorrect?
Look, I'm not going to say anything on about the inquiry on national TV. It'd be completely inappropriate.
OK. I mean, you know, it's been widely reported that the chair of the Afghan inquiry has ordered you to hand over these names and that you could face a prison sentence if you don't. And you're not going to say anything on that at all?
I'm sorry to be boring, Sophie, but I'm just not going to say anything about the inquiry because I think it'd be unprofessional. OK, all right, understood. In the Prime Minister's speech today, he said that he wants to make the UK the best place in the world to be a veteran. How do you think it is for veterans today in the UK? I think we've transformed from where we were 10 years ago. I think when I came into this, that was my driving force to get into politics, and I wanted to create dedicated pathways for mental health, for homelessness, for physical injuries, for employment. And don't get me wrong, it's been a rough ride. I mean, you know, the last two Conservative Prime Ministers, I've left office under them, right? So it's not been a straightforward journey, but I can honestly, hand on heart, stay here today and state that the UK is in a completely different place when it comes to veterans affairs and what it feels like to be a veteran. Is everything perfect? No, of course it's not, and there's lots more to do. But if you look at, you know, for example, Op Courage, the UK's first dedicated mental health care pathway for veterans, I set that up in 2019. It's 22 to 23 million pounds a year. We had 19,000 referrals in its first year. And where were all these people going before? We've launched Op Restore around physical health, so you don't pay for your prosthetics or any wheelchair assistance that you may need. We've done Fortitude to end forced rough sleeping in the veteran community this year as well. So look, I think we've done some incredible stuff, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend everybody feels that at the moment, and I'll keep going until they do.
I just wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about how it can be to be a veteran. Because I always remember this was kind of really quite a long way back. It was one of my first interviews that I did as a journalist, actually, was with this young lad who'd basically come back from fighting in Afghanistan. I'm always going to remember it. And he had been very badly injured. He couldn't carry a glass of water across the room. His parents had to scrimp and save to pay for the care that he needed. And it just really, it's always stood with me. I've never actually spoken about it on TV before, but it's always just really stood with me, him sharing that story to me. And I just wonder if you could explain a little bit why you think it is that veterans are so often, I just guess, just not cared for properly by the country that they fought for.
Honestly, Sophie, it's been a question of when from my maiden speech onwards, I've often talked about this, and the kind of emotional case for it has always been really clear. But if you're going to actually categorically change what it feels like to be a veteran and not just talk about what you're putting into the machine, but what it feels like coming up through it, you have to go beyond that emotional case to the kind of intellectual application of policy. So, for example, why, when there was millions of pounds in the charity sector, did veterans feel like they couldn't get mental health care? Well, the truth was it was quite discombobulated. It was a bit of a postcode lottery. You had to tell your story a number of times. You didn't always get evidence-based care. What it needed was that real kind of professionalism and leadership that a department outside of the Ministry of Defence could deliver by holding together all those different functions of government to make it work for veterans. And that's the step change we've been able to achieve, is setting up that OVA with a cabinet minister responsible. We're only catching up our Five Eyes allies. You have, the Kiwis and Australians did this in the 40s and the 60s. The Americans did it under Bush in the 80s after Vietnam, and we've done it today. And, we are finally, you don't see cases like that anymore. And if you do, and if anyone's watching this programme tonight who knows of a case like that, they need to get in touch with me straight away. This Prime Minister has made a watershed commitment on veterans affairs, and we're following through that every day. And look, to be frank, I am worried about the election because in the Labour Party, my opposite minister didn't even turn up for questions last week. They've got nothing to say about veterans, and there's 2.27 million veterans in this country who deserve to know what both parties think about them at the election.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Johnny Mercer, speaking to us there. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up. As Common Sense Tsar S. McVeigh says equality and diversity jobs in the civil service are a waste of taxpayers' money, we're asking, have we lost good track of old-fashioned common sense? Donald Trump tells the press his hush money trial is a Biden prosecution worthy of a third world country. And up next, the shocking report into maternity care that finds thousands of women are being failed every year.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours, and we're going to take it back.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power. Now, freedom! There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes, torrential rain and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters?
Stas, what do you think the Russians wanted to do with the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued with its ultimatum to the people of Ashkelon, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous.
We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Hello, welcome back. Now, there's a story today that I really want to talk about. It's the birth trauma inquiry by a cross-party group of MPs that's called for a national plan to improve maternity care after speaking to 1,300 women and finding what it described as shockingly poor quality in how we look after women giving birth. Now, in the Politics Hub team call this morning, I joked that after having 2 children in recent years, I've become radicalised when it comes to maternal health care. But if I am being honest with you, it's not really a joke. I actually do feel quite radicalised about it because maternity care in the UK is, in my opinion, really quite shocking. And my own experiences and the experiences of other mums I talk to, that's not just anecdote, it's supported by inquiries like this one, which found poor care in maternity services is frequently tolerated as normal, and poor quality postnatal care is an almost universal theme. Well, you can say that again. And once again, there's a theme here of women just not being listened to. And that's particularly the case if you're a woman from a non-white background as well. Maternal mortality for black women is currently almost 4 times higher than for white women. And if you're still not radicalised like me yet, well, how about this statistic? 1 in 5 stillbirths and neonatal deaths may have been prevented with better care, according to the charity SANS. Now, that equates to over 800 babies a year, over 25 classrooms of children whose lives could have been saved. Now, Victoria Atkins, the Health Secretary, has told Sky News today that there is a 3-year plan. We're in a transition period in that plan. And look, I welcome today's report. Of course I do. But I've got a horrible feeling that this will end up being just another report into poor maternity care that is swept under the carpet, when really we do need to be demanding serious change, because this is an absolute scandal. Sky's Laura Bundock reports.
I was literally left lying on the ground in pain, wanting to die as the pain was so intense and unbearable.
I was scared to be intimate with my husband as the risk of soiling myself was so high. I would never have another child.
I was covered in blood and my own feces, but there was no one to help me wash. A plastic sheet was put on the bed, and I lay on it in my filth.
These are some of the 1,300 harrowing testimonies, each one from women who've suffered a traumatic birth, and all now shared with a national inquiry.
And obviously it was not looking good. It was the most terrifying experience of my life.
The MP Theo Clark started the birth trauma debate and led the first cross-party inquiry. It found women are often neglected, ignored and belittled.
There is a postcode lottery on maternity services in this country, and to me that didn't seem right, and that's why I'm calling on the Prime Minister today to have a national maternity framework which will set out a standardised maternity policy to all NHS trusts.
The report exposes a lack of compassion and a culture of cover-up. It calls for a new maternity commissioner. Difficult questions and points we put to the Health Secretary.
Do you accept you failed these women? You're still failing women. And will you, as Health Secretary, apologise?
So, first of all, can I thank all of the women who have come forward, not just for the report, but I know have been contacting Sky and other media outlets. For the first time in the NHS's history, you have not just a Secretary of State for Health who is a mum, but also the Chief Executive of NHS England is a mum as well, Amanda Pritchard, and we are working together to try to address some of these issues that we know have arisen in recent years.
How confident are you we're not going to have another maternity scandal? Because there have been several, haven't there?
I think we are in a position of transition. So the reason that NHS England brought forward its 3-year plan is because NHS England itself acknowledges it's going to take time to make all of these changes across the country.
Those changes too late for those who shared stories with the inquiry.
I think we all know that there are a lot of areas where things could be better and things could be improved. But I don't think until this point there's been a real understanding and awareness of just how prevalent it is and how many women suffer from birth trauma.
There is now greater awareness and political engagement. But for those pushing for change, the progress so far is simply too slow. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Right, let's bring in Dawn and Nick, shall we?
Offensive. I think the Secretary of State for Health was absolutely offensive. To say, oh, well, now for the first time you've got a mum, as though that negates, like, the findings of this report. Women, the deaths of women is the highest in 20 years. And you turn around and say, oh, well, I'm a mum. How on earth does that help all of these women that have come forward to give evidence to how they've been treated? It is shocking.
So, you know, I've been taking listeners' phone calls on the radio station I work for, LBC, for 20 years. And we did this story this morning, and from Eastbourne to Edinburgh, and we've discussed everything, the Middle East, Extinction Rebellion, defence cuts or whatever. This is some of the most moving calls I've heard in 20 years. As Dawn rightly says, hideous numbers. I think we have now the highest infant mortality rate up to the year of 1 in most developed countries. There is a medical negligence budget worth £65 billion, of which 65% goes in this field. And I was struck by the words you said, and this is my fear. You know, you and I are, I was going to say old journalists, I'm an old journalist, you and I are journalists together. This must not be allowed just to be forgotten. I mean, credit to Theo Clark, credit to Rosie Duffield, who was, you know, from your side of the fence who put this report. But this, now, what Rosie Duffield said on the show was that we need a czar. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not normally a huge fan of commissioners or ombudsmen or women or czars, but if that's what these two, something has got to be done. It is simply unacceptable that a country is developed like this. It is almost a lottery as to whether you or your wife or your girlfriend or your sister or is going to get through. It is not acceptable.
Yeah, and it is a lottery, Nick. That's the thing. It is. So this levelling up means nothing because it literally is a postcode lottery to the type of care you're going to get. And as you said, Sophie, black women die 4 times the rate than white women. And it's just, and it should be, it's just so soul destroying.
That statistic in some ways for me goes to the heart of it, because for me this is about women not being listened to, right? Not being listened to. And sadly, we know that, you know, often women from minority backgrounds are ones who that applies to the most. It's just...
Were you listened to?
No, not at all times.
Right, so there's a journalist like you, you're not that good at coming forward.
I'll be honest.
And even a young woman like you felt you weren't listened to. So without being rude, what chance is there for some folk out there, how the hell are they, how are they meant to cut through?
And this is, you know, like, I'm sort of 39, so, you know, a lot of my kind of peer group were in this, you know, giving birth quite recently.
Sure.
And I guess I'm just quite shocked. I'm quite shocked. I find it quite shocking, you know, the standard of care that people are still receiving. And it can be deeply traumatic because it is such a huge moment, probably the biggest moment in so many people's lives, giving birth, and the miracle of birth and babies entering, you know, the world.
It should be joyous.
Surely
it should be joyous.
Exactly, and too often it's not.
Yeah, most people have this kind of Disney kind of view of how it's going to be. And then the reality is so shocking that then, you know, they're in shock, they're in distress, they suffer from PTSD. And so what we have to do is, I don't care if it's a mum or a dad or whoever who is running like the department, what we need is commitment.
What do you think of Jonathan Reynolds? Because I thought he might have been stronger on it, I'll be honest, when I spoke to him.
Can't remember what he said.
He basically,
precisely. I mean, it's not his watch.
Yeah,
in fairness,
that's true.
And I don't want to be rude. He's a bloke, so he doesn't have the same, can I say, skin in the game without offending anybody. I think he could have come forward a little bit more, but maybe he was a little bit
I think he said they're going to look at the... Oh, that's right. I remember what he said. Look at the report, and there's a number of... I know, but there are a number of recommendations in the report that the Labour Party has already said that they're going to do, like recruit 8,000...
Do you think a czar is the way forward? I'm not saying it's not, by the way. I genuinely don't. Rosie Duffield thinks it might be.
I think that you need somebody
to be a champion
who's going to
champion
and overlook and make sure that there are standards across the whole of the NHS with regards to giving birth. And that means, I mean, we're going to recruit 8,000 mental health practitioners.
Right.
We're going to ensure that we have more doctors and nurses and midwives, and also retain them. Like what we've forgotten, I was at Central Middlesex Hospital today. We've got a lovely new sparkling orthopaedics centre there. And I was talking to one of the doctors, and they said that they are losing doctors and nurses because post-COVID, they're suffering from PTSD and they just can't cope anymore, and they're not having the care that's really needed. So we need that investment. You know, we need that investment from government. They need to take it
potentially
seriously.
a culture change as well, I have to say. Thanks.
We're
out of time. Well,
okay.
Go on.
I was going to say, 22 miles across, you're going to France. This is unrecognisable. That's 22 miles away. Why are we doing it so badly this side of the channel? Sorry.
Postnatal care in France, different thing.
Different world.
True. Thank you both very much. Really interesting debate. Coming up next on the Politics Channel. A backlash against proposals to ban MPs accused of sexual misconduct from Parliament only when they're charged rather than from the point of arrest. Critics say the watered-down plans failed to protect staff on the parliamentary estate. We'll have the latest from New York as Donald Trump's longtime lawyer and personal fixer testifies in the former president's hush money trial. Welcome back. Now to the rules around MPs accused of crimes being allowed into the parliamentary estate, and a row over proposals which critics say are being diluted. Now, MPs are voting on whether to exclude colleagues who've been charged by police with a violent or sexual offence from the parliamentary estate. The House of Commons Commission had recommended the potential ban should kick in as soon as someone is arrested, which is a far lower bar. I spoke to the Liberal Democrat MP Wendy Chamberlain, who's tabled an amendment to try and toughen up the proposals so that they would come into force at the point of arrest.
So this dates back to 2022, Sophie, when it was agreed that we needed a process for a risk-based exclusion for MPs accused of serious offences or sexual offences from a criminal perspective. And we've debated this in the House a few times. The Commission came forward with recommendations which triggered this process to start at the point of arrest. We didn't get to debate that motion. It was pulled. We had a general debate last year, and now the Leader of the House, Penny Mordaunt, has brought forward an amended motion which has changed arrest to charge. And simply put, Sophie, from a safeguarding perspective, this is a place of work for many people, and I don't think that MPs should be exceptional in the perspective of being treated like somebody else, a teacher, for example, in a workplace where they had been arrested on suspicion of something like rape. So my amendment I brought forward tonight is basically to put it back to what were the Commission's original recommendations.
Wendy Chamberlain explaining that amendment there. Now, it's a box office day in Donald Trump's hush money trial. The prosecution's star witness, Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer and personal fixer, took the stand. He was asked about his role in arranging hush money payments to the former porn star Stormy Daniels during the 2016 presidential election campaign. He told the court when Trump was preparing to announce his campaign for president, the former president warned him that there would be a lot of women coming forward. And the former president pleaded not guilty to 34 counts of fraud. He also denies having any sexual encounter with Miss Daniels. Well, the former president did not hide his displeasure at being at the mercy of the legal process.
This trial is rigged. It's dishonest. It's a disgrace to New York. It's a disgrace to the country. I should be out campaigning now instead of sitting in a very cold courthouse all day long. This is a Biden prosecution. It's election interference at a level that nobody in this country has ever seen before. This is for third world countries.
Well, let's go live to New York. We can speak to our US correspondent, James Matthews. Should be our Donald Trump correspondent at the minute, James. I mean, what an extraordinary trial to be reporting on. What's been happening today?
Well, box office stuff, as you said, Sophie, the big finish. He won't be the last prosecution witness, but certainly he is key to the whole prosecution case. Michael Cohen, the former fixer to Donald Trump, who prosecutors hope can point the finger at him. And from first-hand evidence say, yep, that's the guy who was behind this hush money scheme, that he did it with the intent to interfere with the election, and that's a crime that they're trying to prosecute. Today we've heard about the Stormy Daniels payment, the woman who was paid by Michael Cohen. He was then reimbursed. And Cohen has been talking about when Trump found out that she was about to sell her story just before the 2016 election. He said this, Trump's reaction was, this is a disaster, a total disaster. Women are going to hate me, he said. Guys, they think it's cool. But this is going to be a disaster for the campaign. And talking about the money and paying the money to Stormy Daniels, Trump told him to push that out as long as he possibly could. Push it out as long as you can. Just get the election, just get it past the election. If I win, it won't have any relevance. If I lose, I don't really care, said Donald Trump. Julie Rendleman is with me, criminal defense attorney. Hi, Julie. What do you make of what we've heard from the big star witness on?
So, there's a lot to unpack. I think a couple of things that interest me. One is the contact between Melania Trump and Michael Cohen. There's contact between them, phone calls between them, and what does that suggest? It suggests that Melania may have known what was going on, and if she knew what was going on, it kind of removes the possibility that the reason he was hiding this was to protect his wife or protect himself from his wife. I think the other issue that arose is why would Michael Cohen pay this money? And what he said was, well, the reason I'm in touch with Donald Trump all the time is A, he's my boss, he has to approve it, but B, I'm not paying anything out of pocket unless I know I'm going to get paid back by the boss. And so these are things that a jury is potentially going to consider. Coupled with all those calls that corroborate, at least there's dialogue going back and forth. We don't know the conversations. It's up to the jury to decide whether or not he's telling the truth about what those actual conversations were.
Yeah, he's still to be cross-examined, of course. He has credibility issues. Tell me about them and why they are important.
Sure. I mean, anytime a witness testifies, you know, they bring baggage, some more than others. He brings the baggage of having been a convicted felon and being a convicted of lying. And so these are big issues when it comes to an individual testifying and a jury having to believe them beyond a reasonable doubt. And for the prosecution, the job is to basically say whether you think he's a liar in the past. The reason you can believe him is not just what he's telling you, but all the pieces of evidence that surround and corroborate what he's telling you to be true.
Great. Julie Rendelman, many thanks again. As always, so there you go, Sophie. That's a picture for today. He is the last big witness for the prosecution. They might have one, maximum two more. It depends what the defence have, but it may be that we are coming somewhere close to the closing stages of this, if not next week, perhaps the week after next.
James, thank you very much indeed. James Matthews there, keeping us right up to date on that Trump trial. Still to come on the Politics Hub.
For every land yard that you show, you're therefore not saying about all the other things you do or don't agree with. So you're promoting one at the exclusion of other things.
The Minister for Common Sense wages war against, can you guess, not red tape, not health and safety regulations, not gender-neutral toilets, but lanyards.
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8, the shocking state of maternity care in the UK. A report by MPs has revealed a postcode lottery on care with mistakes and failures covered up by hospitals and women treated simply as an inconvenience. Tonight we'll go through what this report tells us about the issues in the health service and how to fix them. That and more on the UK Tonight at 8 o'clock.
I don't think, to my knowledge, a quadriplegic has taken a powerboat around Great Britain before. But the idea is to inspire more disabled people to get out on the water. I was a professional yachtsman before my accident 40 years ago this year. Can't believe it's a lifetime ago now. I broke my neck in a swimming accident. And sailing to me is part of my life. I love being out on the water. I think it's very therapeutic for all of us to, get out, spend some time on the water, and the idea is to inspire others to do so. As you say, I sailed around Great Britain in 2007, and I sailed the Atlantic a few years later. This is altogether different. This is about Wet Wheels, the charity I founded. I'm on a beautiful 9-metre power catamaran. We have 8 of these around the country now, taking more than 10,000 people a year. And the idea is to help raise awareness and raise money to buy another 4 of them. We start here at 10 o'clock this morning from Tower Bridge. HMS President, Lord Mayor of London, Michael Manelli, is coming to wave me off. And then we head clockwise round to Dover, along the south coast, Portsmouth, Falmouth, and then up to Wales, Northern Ireland, then hopefully up around the top of Scotland. And all things being well, we should be back, crikey, 4 or 5 weeks' time. I've told my wife it'll take 3 weeks, so it may take a little bit longer than that. So the nice and easy way is through our Wet Wheels Foundation, wetwheels.org. But if they want to find out more about this particular challenge on Wet Wheels, then we have a website called finishingthedream.co.uk, and people can go along there and donate and help support us and see where we are. We have a tracker. I think it's important to mention that my injury is I'm paralysed from the chest down. I can't move my fingers, so I'm sat right now in a big powered electric wheelchair. And these boats are designed to take disabled people. I go up under a ramp and I can steer the boat even with my disability. So it is genuinely a challenge. For me, physically, it's going to be difficult. 1,500 miles at sea, some quite big seas, being pounded and, the impact it's going to take on my body. But we're expecting to stop in about 18 to 20 places. And we have a road crew following us.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Common Sense Czar Essa McVey says she's going to crack down on diversity initiatives in the civil service, including apparently wearing rainbow lanyards. Yep, good old-fashioned, no-nonsense, common sense, plain lanyards for our Esther. She called for civil servants to get right down off their fashionable hobby horses.
We need to stop the inappropriate backdoor politicisation of the civil service, which diverts time and resources from that focus on the public. We have too often seen them distracted by fashionable hobby horses, especially when it comes to issues like equality and diversity. People want their public servants to be getting on with the job of making their lives better, not engaging in endless internal discussions about ideology, and I'm not prepared to see pointless job creation schemes for the politically correct.
Right, let's bring in Dawn and Nick, shall we? Now, this kind of got me thinking. If we were able to be, the kind of common sense czars for the government, what policies would we bring in? What would be your number one common sense policy?
Can I just first of all say, this government's so offensive, and I'm sure Trump will be so proud of what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? They want to go back to a time where you can do what you want at work and nobody can question it, and having people hide their true self coming into it. Honestly, they're so offensive. But anyway, back to the fertility.
So you wouldn't ban lanyards, I'm guessing. So what would you do, Dawn?
Ban a lanyard?
Well,
what the hell is that?
It wasn't just lanyards. It's £40 million that she says diversity and equality training. The NHS would provide 1,100 extra nurses.
You know what that
£50 million. I'm just saying the other argument. It's a little bit unfair.
It stopped
anyway,
women.
I want to hear your policy.
It stopped women getting harassed or getting people put their hands up their skirt. That's what all that diversity and inclusion stopped. It stopped people being discriminated.
What would you go for, Dawn? Go on then.
Offended by this government. I would stop.
Ban the government.
I would stop. Yeah,
maybe that would be it.
Ban the government. All of them. No, I would stop lying in Parliament.
What are you going to talk about? There'd be nothing left to say.
You sound like totally silent MPs.
Just tell us about your summer holidays.
But that's the thing, right? It would stop some MPs from speaking, and so it should.
What would you go for?
Very simply, the Extinction Rebellion protests and others. If they decide to deface public buildings or destroy anything, then in some instances, I'm afraid Tarquin and Buffy and Camilla are going to actually have to scrub the paint off themselves. I know most of them have never done a hard day's work, but my eye was drawn to a story this weekend. £40,000 to take the MOD Ministry of Defence just down the road from where we are now. £40,000. If you decide to spray red paint, fine. Part of your sentence will be you can scrub it off again. That's my common sense law.
I reckon
I can hear Esther cheering.
I reckon I do. If you're the kind of person who gets on the train before everyone's come off, execution. That's it.
Okay. Wow.
I see.
I know in my office, slow walkers. They hate slow walkers in front of them.
Good one.
What about this? I'm on the train. I'm on the train.
I love it.
Can we ban that?
You know what? I reckon we get elected. I reckon we straight in. I love it. And thank you both.
They're all more sensible than the government. So let's put it that way.
Great to have you both. Always lively with Dawn and Nick. We'll see you tomorrow at 7.